And thank you so much, Oris and Wendy and Samir. I'm delighted to introduce you to this group. And so that everyone is aware, Oris and I have a long-standing friendship. He's an early friend of WiST and also went to Duke. So I just hope that everyone will recognize that I do have a Carolina jersey behind me that I hope doesn't cause Oris too much agita during this meeting. But Oris, you've been a long time, an early friend of WiST, and I'm super excited for the game Friday. I'm glad we're both there in the Final Four.
Absolutely. Good. It's good to see you. Good to be here with you, and of course, Wendy and Samir. And we'll talk on Saturday and see if we're still speaking.
We'll have the text threads going for sure. So to introduce myself to anyone who's new to WiST, I'm Mary Lou McFarland. I'm the CEO and founder of Women in Sports Tech, which we call WiST. And we are a nonprofit that was founded, this is our 5th year, so 5 years ago, to drive growth opportunities for women and really all underrepresented minority groups inside our sports tech business. And we have innovative programs and content such as you're with us now to help you, to help not only change the ratio in this business, but also to enhance and improve cultures. And that's a big part of, most our webinar series to date have been how I got into sports tech, where executives in the business share their journeys of how they got to their roles. But now we realize how important it is more than ever that leaders recognize the value of diversity. So we focus on both those areas here at Women in Sports Tech. And for those of you who are new to the industry, we do define it very broadly to include any role in sports, as technology powers really everything that we do. So a little bit of background, the global sports technology industry is expected to be worth $42 billion by 2026. That's up from $18 billion last year. So how do we ensure that there's an equitable opportunity and a level playing field for everyone to participate in this explosion of growth? And that's why we're here. So that everyone knows, studies show businesses with diverse leadership make better decisions, are more innovative, drive higher profits. Yet 80% of the leadership positions and workforces in this industry are currently still held by white men. The best leaders understand that 4 out of 5 young people today are considering employment opportunities with companies that value DE&I initiatives, and they definitely are recognize that for young employees today or young people looking for work today, it's a requirement, not a preference. So what we'll do today is I want to be able to share some specific initiatives that you all employ, Samir and Wendy and Oris, in terms of baking DE&I into the DNA of your business at all levels. So we want to talk about the benefits of investing in and celebrating diversity and inclusivity. So again, a really warm welcome to you all. If you would let's just take a minute and run around the room here, around the desk, and Oris and Wendy and Samir, go ahead and introduce yourselves and also just share a bit of a snapshot of a highlight of your career and how you got to the role where you are now. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Mary Lou. So I am the Chief People and Inclusion Officer here at the NBA. I've been here June 1st. I'll be here for 7 years. I started as the first Chief Diversity Officer for the league. And then about 1.5 years ago, I was appointed Chief People and Inclusion Officer, where we brought human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion together in one function. I've been doing this work for now going on 22 years. And I started off in a very different space. I've had a very diverse career. I was an electrical engineer by undergrad training. I was a software engineer for a little bit, technology consultant, a strategy consultant, and so on. I mean, I had a lot of different types of roles, including running a group for a large group for an insurance company. What I'll tell you is, again, about 21 years ago, going on 22, I was introduced to this field, this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a consulting capacity. And I was just fascinated by the power and the promise of this work. And I leaped in on faith with a very small consultancy at the time, and I got exposed to the work that that firm was doing on behalf of some of the world's largest organizations. And I found through that work, I could do really important work. I could be challenged, intellectually and professionally, but also I could be in a position to make a difference for those companies, make a difference for their employees, make a difference for the community. And so that journey that, really in terms of the current work I'm doing started 22 years ago and got me here at the NBA about 7 years ago. So no looking back, really, really glad even with all the twists and turns.
Awesome. And Wendy, share your background, which is a different and unique path.
Sure. Well, thank you for that, Oris. That you have some amazing range of experiences. That's a lot to be proud of. I've spent most of my career in the performance athletic footwear and apparel industry. But I started out, I was a collegiate tennis player. And after college, I had the good fortune to spend a few years on the women's professional circuit. And then I was losing more matches than I was winning. It was time to get a real job. And I joined Anderson Consulting because it seemed like the right thing to do, which is now Accenture. And I quickly learned that was not my jam. And so I pivoted and I went back to school and got my MBA. And then when I finished, Reebok was on campus recruiting. And I found the perfect opportunity to sort of marry my newfound education with my real passion, which was still tennis and performance athletics. And so that's how I sort of got into the industry. And unlike Oris, somehow I've stayed in this industry, which was never a big master plan, but things work out. And I've had the good fortune to be at a number of, really good top world-class leading brands over the years and learned a lot along the way. And then about the same duration as you, Oris, I've been coming up on 6-7 years here, where I oversee the HOKA brand and also the Teva brand. And, 7 years ago, I was the first female president ever to lead a running brand. And, that seems like so crazy, right? Like what? So I'm really happy to say I'm not the only one. There's a few other brands now led by women, and we have a great time when we get together and kind of compare notes. So I just use that as an example to say, change can and does happen, but it's not easy and it doesn't happen fast enough. And I try to be very mindful of, how I felt at the beginning at a trade show or in a room as the only woman with a group of, good men, but all men, predominantly all white men, and the change that still needs to happen in order to continue on the road to bring more and more diversity, not just into our teams, but into leadership levels. So happy to be here today, and thank you for the good work that WiST is doing.
Well, thank you. We wouldn't be here without the three of you kind of jumping onto this movement early on. So delighted for our whole audience to get to meet you. And Samir, you have an interesting path as well.
Thanks. Those are two tough acts to follow, but I'll try. I'm really delighted to be here with you, Wendy and Oris, and Mary Lou. As I said before we started, I'm just blown away at what WiST has accomplished. We've been fortunate to be a partner and supporter for a couple of years now. A little bit about myself. So I've been, speaking of zigs and zags, like Oris talked about, I've been an entrepreneur for nearly 20 years. I don't know if I'd recommend that to anyone. But done so in 4 different industries. I co-founded a sports-themed tourist attraction, an investment fund, and was the COO of a fintech marketplace. So all very different things. Most of those places started out as like 2 to 5 person companies. So along the way, I think I've done just about every job. I've plugged in computers, I've found office space, I've done product, I've done sales, I've done finance, et cetera, because you just have to do a little bit of everything. So that muscle memory, I think, has really helped me at GameChanger. But this is in some ways like the most unique role, because we're building a high growth startup inside of a Fortune 500 company, which is not easy to do. For those of you who don't know, GameChanger is part of the Dick's Sporting Goods family. Speaking of Dick's Sporting Goods, the company is led by Lauren Hobart, who is an incredible and inspirational women, CEO. There are not that many in the Fortune 500. There need to be a lot more. They have, as a company, both in the work, in the products of the company and in the work of the company, made huge commitment to women in sports. And we saw at GameChanger that given that we're in the technology space, going back several years, I've been there 5 years, that we really needed to make a long-term investment in, like you say, changing the ratio. So for us, it's been, because it's such a challenging industry to do that in right now. It's been a multi-year investment. It's stuff, doesn't change overnight. We're seeing some dividends, come through on that now with people, women in our team who've really kind of risen through the ranks and are playing really significant roles. So I'm really, appreciative of everything Dix has done for us, and really excited to kind of be here and talk about everything we're doing.
Fantastic. Samir, you and I are birds of a feather in our entrepreneurial endeavors. It's like we're that utility midfielder where what I try to say is I just put the smartest people I can all around me and bring them to the table.
That's right.
But when you see a problem that you uniquely feel like you can solve, you just are compelled to do it. And that's what we've done here. So I've worked in sports tech for the last 10 to 12 years, mostly on the sports performance side, which kind of mostly overlaps, I think, Wendy, with some of your background there. But the innovative technologies just completely blow my mind. It's so exciting to see where this industry has gone on both sides, on the sports performance side and on the business side. And we really try, we have a very broad umbrella when we describe all the roles that are available. But what would be fun to start with is just to share some of what we think are the most exciting and innovative technologies that are out there. And you could certainly refer to some of the things you're doing, Samir, if you want to start, because we had a WiST fellow work with you last summer on a product that is literally game changing for streaming videos, so grandma and grandpa can see the videos of their kids playing across the country, right? So tell us a little bit about things that are exciting you right now, Samir.
Sure. Well, that was a perfect segue, because that's where I was going to start. So just real quick, for those of you who don't know, GameChanger connects, like Mary Lou said, grandma and grandpa to, sorry, Oris, the most important game of the week, which is the one your kid is playing in. And just for context, real quick, last year, 4.5 million youth sports games were scored and streamed on the GameChanger platform, with about 5 million active users, moms, dads, grandparents, et cetera, kind of consuming the content. So what we see happening in streaming of games is really profound. And in terms of technology, it's revolutionizing what the coaches and players do and how the fans consume. And by the way, this is at all levels of play, right, from professional on down. On the coach side, a lot of it's driven by this, AI, machine learning. You can take video and instantaneously get analysis of it in such a sophisticated way to kind of help the coach and improve training. And then the fan can now consume that video in a smart, rich way, as opposed to just sort of like a basic feed, like on your television. You can interact with stats. You can automate highlight clips. You could instantaneously see a clip of all your, let's say it's youth, like all your kids' hits for the season. I mean, that stuff's not pie in the sky. It's here right now. And I think really underpinning it, not to go too deep on the tech, right, is you can now take high quality video and compress it in a way that, you couldn't do years ago. So you can just share that everywhere. And now so much more of it can happen on the phone, which is really exciting for us because we're very mobile centric. So you don't need, you can literally do like AI stuff on the phone. That's only getting better. Apple, Samsung's, companies that produce phones are just innovating at such a fast pace. That's kind of the bet we're making, is that there's going to be more and more of this stuff on mobile.
Awesome. It is so exciting to see. And the fact that it is here, we're no longer just talking about it, like this is actually available now, and it's democratized to a certain extent. It is accessible. And I think that's certainly a big, important factor for all of us, is that what we do is accessible. So Wendy or Oris, what would you say?
There's that extreme end of stuff that Samir was just talking about, which sort of is mind bending. And I sit there going, why didn't we have this when my 3 kids were, in high school and whatnot? But, even on the other side, just the advancements in social media and our ability to tap directly into the consumer, like in a real-time basis. It's not, super, super high tech, but it's really has changed our industry from having to rely on the retailer middleman, if you will, to be able to go direct to the consumer, not just to sell them something directly, but more importantly, just to get their feedback. It's been it's a huge leg up for all of us.
You know, Mary Lou, your comment at the open about the fact that the space is going to expand to $42 billion, I think you said by 2026, it's just kind of mind-boggling. But then when I think about the level to which technology is expanding throughout everything we do at every level of our game, at basketball more broadly, and then of course sports more broadly than that. You've heard, you know, examples already. It makes sense, and I think about our use of technology on the court, the product on the court, and the activation of the product in terms of having technology that helps us make decisions about whether the ball went out or not, and who touched it last, and so on. Technology related to the fan experience and how they interact with the game. And, you know, you heard Samir talk about the power of mobile devices to create all, you know, new kinds of opportunities and so on. And of course, then, you know, from a performance standpoint, again, this has already been explored. And then what about the organization? I mean, we are transforming how we run our organization in terms of how we interact with our employees. And so technology is proliferating at so many different levels. And I mean, WiST certainly is well positioned, and the attendees and others who want to get involved in sports in this way, it's such a rich opportunity. And, you know, we're betting the farm, if you will, on technology really transforming, you know, our business.
Yes, also interesting too, because it's not just the technology, but it's also this cultural shift toward diversity that we spoke about. Like, I think the last few years, you know, I would say we were unintentionally, but well poised at WiST for what COVID then brought, right? All of this different ways of working, different ways of engaging with employees, things that happened with George Floyd in 2020. So I feel like it's the best time of all to be able to have these conversations and bring people into this industry, because everyone is welcome, right? So if we look at, let's talk a little bit tangibly about some of the processes that I know you all have had to evolve. I mean, it is kind of a natural segue to, in terms of, you know, when you're running your business, we all have process metrics and KPIs. And we want to be able to measure success. And we at WiST are working on this ourselves. We're undergoing a research study that will help us capture qualitative and quantitative data on where are we today with diversity and retention, but also where are we going. So in terms of, just tell us, if you would, and we can start with you, Wendy, how are you measuring success around filling the pipeline of talent, making a negotiation of offers, because we know that can be different. Research shows negotiations can be handled differently for a woman than for a man. Promotion, executive sponsorship. So all across your organization, how are you measuring progress?
Sure. Well, the first thing, and you pointed out rightfully so, we are measuring it, right? And what we measure matters. We know this, right? You know, budgets reflect choices, and measurement, you know, reflects what is getting our attention. So I would say it was in the fall of 2020 that Deckers, the parent company that owns HOKA and Teva and UGG and some other brands, you know, we got together and we said, okay, you know, we have a goal by 2025. We want to make sure that leadership, as we were measuring at director level and above, we set our sights on having 25% Black, Indigenous, people of color in those seats by 2025. And at the time, I think we were around 14%. And I proudly can tell you that for HOKA, we are now 26% BIPOC at director level and above. Honestly, I did not think it would be possible to make the progress as quickly as we've made it. But, you know, you change your mindset, it becomes front and center, and here we are. And we're by no means done, right? Because we've also had the benefit of rapid growth. So we're able to hire, and we're able to promote. Opportunity brings opportunity and possibility to a lot of different things and people. But, you know we have to continue on this journey. So that's just one example. And then, you know, having a real measurement too on our marketing and making sure that we are reflecting a diverse array of consumers in our marketing. We measure that, and just overall hires. You know, I think in the last year or so, almost 50% of the hires that we have made have been people of color. So a lot to be proud of and a lot of work still to do, because as we'll talk about in a minute, that's only part one. And how do you make people feel like they belong and want to stay?
That's right. And Oris, if you would go here, because I've had the honor of having this discussion with you before, because you have influence not only over your employees at the NBA, but there's things you're doing that help your teams throughout the league. And so if you could share some of the ways that you guys are helping influence that, league wide, would be really interesting.
Yeah, sure. It starts with what you just heard from Wendy. It is about measuring the things that are important, that reflect your commitments, that create a sense of accountability, and to measure them and to report and to tweak and to communicate and to provide support, and then to keep measuring and to make sure we're making progress. So that's central, and that gets everyone focused. And we can have a debate about what we should be measuring and what our objectives should be. But once we land on that, then we all are in lockstep, really working to move the needle. So that's really foundational. I'll tell you what I'm particularly excited about is the work we've done to build programming and training and learning experiences and tools and resources dedicated to supporting that growth, right? So it's one thing to lay out these objectives and to build these measurement systems, but we're asking people to do things differently. We're asking people to change their behaviors, to source people and think about things a little bit differently, and people require support. It takes a lot of energy to break the cycles, that have been built up over a long period of time. And so I personally, among many others, literally traveled the country having conversations on a learning experience we call it inclusive recruiting and selection, where we took the recruiting process, that funnel that starts when you create a job description and post it. And we identified how bias shows up at every step of that funnel from the moment you create the job description, and then every step down to the final selection. And we not only, took that funnel and broke it down, but we also identified ways to interrupt that bias. And then we built that into a training experience, and we took it around the country. And so that's just one example of really what it takes. And Wendy and I know Samir have similar examples, but that's what it takes. Make the commitment, set the objectives, build the measurement systems, and then provide the support and the expectations. And then finally, through all that, you hope people see the light, and get on board. But if they don't see the light, then that's when you turn up the heat. Make sure they feel the heat.
Well, that's just so true. The gig is up. It's like no one's going to want to work for you or in this environment any longer. So this is what we coach our young women all the time. It's okay. It's okay. That person should not, but that person also shouldn't impede you from doing something else within that organization even, right? So there's culture and there's climate, which we'll talk about. But Samir, what would you say you all are doing? Because I know you're growing at the speed of light there, hiring as fast as you can hire.
Yeah, well, first of all, I wholeheartedly agree with everything Wendy and Oris said, the initiatives, the tracking. So what I would add is, it's just on the tracking. We got a lot of support from our parent company. They made a huge commitment to all of this. We sort of translated, given the industry difference, we sort of translated a lot of our tracking to the tech market. We track on gender, on other forms of diversity, age as well, right? The tech industry is in some ways a lot of very young people, and so we're doing a lot of that tracking. The only other thing I'll also say is we've made a big commitment to what we call, or I guess it's called, tech ethics, right? And it's more around bias inside of the work of technology, even in the code. There are words that are used in the nomenclature of technology that are rooted in a lot of bias. And so we've literally gone through, and this is a conscious decision to take time away on the part of, let's say, engineers from the day-to-day work of the product to change some of those things. So that's been another area that we're really proud of. And we're seeing a lot of tech companies do the same thing.
Yes, also interesting, and a little bit off what you said, Oris, in terms of if people don't kind of understand it, how do we help to change beliefs and values, right? To interrupt it. We'll recognize we all have bias. We all bring bias to the table. How do we recognize and interrupt it? But I guess I would have a question, and I'll start with you, Samir, in terms of, we've worked with companies who faced internal pushback, like from their engineering team, who did not understand why they needed to not just be all white men sitting there. And that's interesting. How do you as the leader, excuse me, I'm going to turn that off, address that, right? If you find that you're facing, even inside your own company, kind of pushback.
Yeah, absolutely. What we've done, and like anyone, we'd have faced some of that pushback. We've connected it back to the product and the customer, our user, right? So for the way we build products is really talk to our users and understand what they want, as opposed to just guessing. That culture requires a real openness to diverse points of view, because you're going to hear from users who don't like what you're doing. You're going to hear from users who don't look like you or act like you or are like you. And you have to filter all that in a respectful and comprehensive way, and then go back and build the product. So we have tied that culture to our internal team building, which is, we're so diverse and open-minded with our work and our users and our customers, and our users are in every state and every community in the country. Let's apply that internally. Now, in a high growth company, our people managers in particular are under a massive amount of pressure, somewhat driven by me, to hire quickly, right? And but what we've insisted on is, and I insist on this in the searches I'm doing for leadership team and on everyone, is that we can't cut corners on building diverse teams, right? And I think that one of the best ways to do this, if you're in a market where it's hard to build those talent pools, even if you're trying hard, is you have to take a long-term view. Maybe you can build that talent pool internally by developing earlier career individuals. That takes a long-term view and a long-term commitment, but it's worked for us. And the very last thing I'll say, because, and like you started with at the beginning, sports to an extent is a lot of men, and we have framed our employee value proposition in a way that you don't need to like sports to work at GameChanger, and that has expanded the pool. And it's different for every company, but in our case, there's a real community element to what we do, and connecting families. And you could connect over a music concert your kids in. So sports is just one mechanism for connection. And I'm not saying that only men work with us because they like sports, or people who aren't men on the opposite. But we've expanded the number of reasons why you might want to work with us, and really nurtured those. And that certainly made us more able to attract a more diverse set of people interested in joining us.
Wendy or Oris, anything you'd like to add? I think you heard a really sound approach from Samir, and not much to add there.
Wendy, have you all ever surveyed I guess that's a question too. Have you surveyed your people to find out their beliefs and values around this?
Yeah, we actually do. We do 3 surveys a year now, sort of the employee pulse survey, where we survey, depending on the time of year, on a number of different things. But that it is helpful. It is something that we need to keep going back to, because as new people come in, how is the culture changing and morphing, and where are people at? Yeah, there's no quick remedy here, but I think the more that you make it part of what you do from the very outset, how you're onboarding people, that they're very clear from the outset that this is a big part of your business, your culture, your team, your community. And then, it's a fine balance between catching, you're wanting to meet people where they're at and bring them further along. And your objective isn't to catch people doing bad or catch people messing up. It's to bring everybody along further. At the same time, a relatively low tolerance for anything that's not acceptable. So I say these things kind of in tandem just because it is, I think it shows the difficult nature of the times that we find ourselves in, of what we're facing and challenging ourselves with as leaders. Yeah, it's new territory and super, super important. And if it was easy, they wouldn't need us.
Could I just pick up on the notion of asking your employees, what their sentiments are and how they're feeling? Because, we certainly do that, not dissimilar from what you heard from Wendy. But we've also found that by taking a look at those results and that sentiment and then looking at it based on different groups, different intersectional demographics, to get a sense of how different groups of people are experiencing the organization, that also gives us insight into things that we can and should be doing differently for the experience that they're having at the organization, and how we might need to, really to Samir's earlier point, reach out and connect with the external talent, marketplace to make sure that we are inviting and we have a culture that, is rich, regardless of who you are. So the employee survey, the engagement survey, what we call it, because we're much more focused on engagement than anything else, is a mechanism to really understand, by whatever way you want to cut it, how people are experiencing the organization. And where we might be losing capacity, where we might be losing energy because, we have cultural, challenges that we need to close or address.
Building on that, if I can, another way that we've found to be very beneficial outside of the survey is we have a number of employee resource groups. And rather than, let someone form a group and, have a coffee or a book club, or it's bringing those employee resource groups into the business to hear from them, to kind of get a very quick, sometimes read on what is this particular group, what is really on the top, front and center of their mind. That's been sort of, I think, a huge benefit, not only of just having the groups in general, but actually bringing them, and we need to do more of that, bring them more into the businesses.
Well, and it kind of plays to, there are things I've learned since working here with WiST, is our friend Jarvis Sam at Nike, who's been on our board from almost the beginning, talked about the difference of culture versus climate. And I think in larger companies, you may set the culture at the top, right, as the leader, but then how do you ensure that your manager is aware of how to coach their team that currently may not be that diverse? There may be a lonely only on your team. And rather than coaching just the lonely only, how important it is to make sure that everyone who's managing and interacting with that person, is inclusive, celebrates differences, doesn't treat them differently if they make a mistake, which can often happen. So I think that's, from where I sit, one of the bigger challenges for leaders of large organizations is you're responsible ultimately for the climate that each one of your managers sets. And how do you ensure that, how, especially if they might be high performing, but they're not performing well in terms of having everyone feel like they belong and they're included.
Well, let's stick with the survey, right? I mean, we can look at the results by team. We can ask, and we do ask, a very specific set of inclusion-related questions that allow us to look at an individual team, an individual manager, a leader, to say, how are his or her people reflecting on her leadership from an inclusion point of view? And it gives us incredible data, and we can benchmark against others in the organization, department by department, within sub-departments. We can obviously benchmark externally. And so that's just one mechanism to find out where we've got opportunity areas, where we've got hot spots, and where we need to, intervene. And so that's, I mean, you've got the same tool is rich with data. When we ask our employees, we've got to do something with that. And so that's, that we're trying to do much more, than we ever have with that data.
And Wendy or Samir, in terms of managing your managers, any advice there for other leaders too?
Yeah, I think we always have to be modeling the best behavior, and we have to be mindful that we're going to slip up too. And when we do, we need to come forward and say, I mishandled that. And I think that is a super important aspect of this as well, to try to be bringing people along. But it's a tricky one because you have people that might be very, very good at their functional job. And it's so much more than that, right? As leaders now, that not just now, any sort of leadership position relies so heavily on, a broader array of skills, a softer set of skills, and much more empathy, a high emotional EQ, if you will. Yeah, and that you have to look for that. You have to train it and develop it.
Samir, any examples on your end?
I think I would really just echo what was said, particularly what Wendy said, is the leadership by example, right? Everything you do as a leader is scrutinized, and that's as it should be. And we certainly try in every form. I'll start with myself of ensuring that we get that diverse point of view. I like to say to everyone that I work with, the best decisions are made when you get as diverse and as sort of broad a range of feedback and input into it, of course, within the time frame that the decision requires. And so I like to say, be selfish about incorporating as many points of view as you can. And that almost always equates with a diverse set of views. And so if someone's not speaking up, then appropriately and nicely and kindly encourage them to do it, and take that, those extra few minutes, let's say in a meeting. And it is not just the right thing to do. It's helpful to the person making that decision or doing that work. Is you're going to do better if you incorporate those additional points of view, even from people that are, that for some reason might be, as you said, like sort of the lonely, they might be unwilling to kind of speak up or might feel generally excluded. You have to just take the initiative.
If I could just make just real quick, Mary Lou, you heard the example from Samir, and I think it underscores the point that while some leaders have that EQ that Wendy spoke about, many don't. And so we're asking them to lead in a very new environment for some of them, or a more challenging environment. We're asking them to do things that they may not naturally have the instinct for. And so we have to help them. We have to provide resources, toolkit. One of the things that we're building out is a toolkit. So when we're in a performance management cycle, we can help our leaders get in the right mindset to have an inclusive performance management conversation with the people on their team, right? Don't assume that they're going to do what you said earlier, treat everyone in an equitable way. There are some things that we can do to really prepare ourselves and to interrupt the bias that naturally creeps up in those kinds of situations. And think about all the moments that matter during the course of a business cycle, and the meeting situation Samir just referenced, and there's so many others, including the interview process. The more we can provide guidance and guidelines and toolkits, so before I step into that situation, I can get in the right frame of mind and the right behavioral pattern. Well, the better we can create the right outcomes, and then that reinforces itself, and then organizationally, we just become much better. So I just don't think it's enough to create the expectation and hold leaders accountable. We have to support them while they're making that transition or growing into these expectations.
So true. And what we've found in many, many conversations with teams, at this point over the last 5 years, is that just the awareness, just giving people space to have conversations and be aware of things that they maybe just straight up had never thought of. I mean, I literally spoke with a new partner for WiST this week. He was looking for mentorship for his one woman on this one team. And I said, yes, and we should also make sure that the men she's working for are trained and mentored over how to engage with her, right? So it's really not about it. Well, it's twofold. It's about having her feel confident and courageous to stand her ground and provide her value. But the team around her has to stop and be aware too of how awkward that might be. You know, sometimes you just put yourself in the other person's shoes. One of the best things I'll say to men is, can you imagine if you were on a Zoom right now and you were the only man with 26 women? You know, and that's been me in numerous roles where I've worked over the years. And luckily, you know, I enjoy working with men. I've always felt respected for the value that I brought, but that doesn't always happen. And so it goes both ways. What were you going to add, Wendy?
Well, you're absolutely right. And, you know, I have a feeling, you know, Mary Lou, that maybe you and I are, you know, it takes a fair amount of courage, you know, to be that only person, the only lonely. You can do one of two things. You can say, I'm never doing that again because that was so uncomfortable. I don't want to be part of this. Or you can go, okay, I'm going to be a game changer. Samir, I'm going to be a game changer. And that takes real courage. And not everyone is wired like that. And that's okay. But we're going to lose those people unless we understand, to your point, put yourself in their shoes. What did it feel like when I was in that position? And how do I kind of bring someone along with me, and not just, to your point, focus on that person as having an issue, but instead on the culture and the community that you're asking them to be part of. How do you change that? And it doesn't happen on PowerPoint at the top. That is what is real. And how do you change that? It's difficult, and it's so important.
Well, we are tech people doing a variety of roles inside of a tech industry, but we're also deeply human. And I think to stop, what we have done from the beginning is we lead with love. Oris, I heard that from a friend of yours, that we lead with love and assume that everyone that we work with would like to be better. And as soon as you start with that premise,
Nice.
It just makes everything feel easier and more human. And so, you know, and in terms of also mistakes will be made, right? Like I have even managed a woman where, you know, there was only so much control I had over an experience that she had when I was not with her. And I felt that at the end of the day, that I failed her, that I let this negative experience happen when it was not technically on my watch. But I think it's also important, Wendy, you touched on this, to acknowledge that leaders don't have all the answers. We don't get it right every single time. And it's important to express your own vulnerabilities, right? I think the best leaders do that. Mm-hmm. And I see that in all three of you. I mean, is there an example you might share of where, you know, I think we learn more when we fail. And if there was an opportunity where that you could share that you learn from, you know, a specific thing.
I mean, I'll share. I'll stop short of giving you a specific example, but I will give you the example of, you know, my husband is Taiwanese. We have 3 daughters, biracial girls. And, you know, I have found myself at the dinner table many a time where, you know, my daughters will say, no, mom, you don't get it. You don't get it. There's no way you can get it. And, you know, that's really powerful for me to feel that from people that I know, love, and trust, as opposed to reading it in a book or hearing it on a panel even, right? When you feel it firsthand, you're like, wow, I guess I really don't. I don't know what this must be like.
The level of empathy is called upon more than ever, right? Yeah. Oris, can you give any examples from your world? It wouldn't have to necessarily be where you wish you did something differently, but someone in your world.
No, I don't mind talking about myself in that regard. And I'll just say, really plainly, as a younger professional, I don't know that I appreciated how important relationships were in the working environment and in business and certainly in life, but in the business setting, I really was focused on and maybe taught to believe that it really is about your intellect, your effort, and your business outcomes, but your ability to influence through relationships and to build relationships and to understand the business through relationships is so critical. And honestly, there are a lot of people, particularly when I was a young professional, who, when I look back, were really investing in me, leaning into me, looking to build those relationships. And I didn't necessarily appreciate what they were doing. And appreciate meaning I didn't understand, and I didn't necessarily reciprocate, co-invest in those relationships. I'm not complaining about the journey I've been on, but I'd love to believe that knowing what I know now, I would have given more, created more capacity for those relationships to develop. I would have been less cynical about those folks who wanted to get to know me better on my own terms, and I would have leaned into more relationships across difference, because I, as a young professional, surrounded myself with folks who made me feel comfortable until I learned to know better.
Yes, and anything from your journey you would add, Samir? Any early things, especially as a founder, that you might do differently?
I think what I would add, actually, kind of building on what Wendy said, because I know I've made mistakes over time, and we've all learned around all the topics that we're discussing today over time. And I think I ignored, not generally, but in this context, I ignored the learning that was available to me literally on my own roof from my spouse. I now have two girls who are in sort of the middle school, elementary age group. But my wife has gone through a lot of career success, gone through a lot of zigs and zags, like around all the topics we've discussed. And it took me a really long time to kind of, I was always supportive, but just really learn from it. It took me a long time, but it's, you learning and inspiration can come from anywhere. It can come from your kids, like Wendy talked about. It can come from your spouse. It doesn't have to come at work. So that's been particularly the last sort of 5-10 years. I've really relied on my wife to kind of help me kind of just learn more and more. We can always keep learning as well as we might be doing something. So rely on your friends and family for it. Doesn't have to just be at work.
That's definitely great advice. And so speaking of advice, we're going to go to some Q&A here in a minute, but kind of to wrap up, for people listening who you're all trying to hire, I'm aware of the massive hiring, that's happening right now. What advice would you give, right, for someone who is a woman or another underrepresented minority person trying to break through if they don't already have the network? We at WiST are providing a lot of network for these young people, really people at all stages of their careers. But what advice would you have for breaking in?
I'm happy to start. That works.
Sure.
I would say you have to be confident, right? So I've thought about every role I've done or business that I've been involved in launching or anyone that I've promoted. Almost in none of those cases was I or that person truly ready for that next job. If you wait till you're perfectly ready, whether it's an entry-level job or later, it's going to probably pass you by, and you're never going to be ready. You just have to be confident, and you have to seize the opportunity. And I certainly leaders, people in positions of power have to also do that, but you should really believe in yourself and don't let a job description or a random conversation that isn't properly structured, dissuade you from what you know you can do.
Good advice. I would build and just say, it's never, the time in a way has never been better, because we as leaders are all looking more than ever, A, to hire, B, to hire more diverse leaders and people and associates and experts. So although it's not easy, it's in a way the time is easier than it has been. And so take advantage of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would add that even though it's an incredible time, there's a lot of demand for underrepresented talent. The roles that are out there are still highly coveted, and sports organizations tend to be smallish organizations. So, those roles tend to be very competitive. And I'll share what I've shared in many conversations I've had, particularly recently. Open your aperture and open your mindset to consider upstream roles that could lead you to that ideal opportunity that you're pursuing, and recognize that the path there to the kind of work you want to do, the kind of role you have may have a couple of development steps to take to get there, but get in the game. Like, anyway, just get
Yes.
into the game, and then you're in a much better position. And so that's what counts that off.
I think that's a great point. One of our, my friend Elizabeth O'Brien at IBM Sports, she always says, think about the role 2 or 3 steps from here. Go in and crush this, and then be thinking about what you're going to do next. And then our friend Wendy, our friend Stephanie Howard gives the advice too, that in many cases, you may have to be even more prepared. Like, if you don't have a network internally there, make sure you've done your homework. Make sure that you do show up prepared and with courage and confidence, because employers, the best employers now are looking 20 resumes deep, 40 resumes deep. They're not just hiring, the person they played football with in college anymore. And that's this. I agree with all of you that the time has never been better, and we just want people to get in the game and recognize all the incredible opportunities that there are. Especially working in cultures that like yours, where they know that they're welcome. So let's just see if we have any questions. This has been so awesome. While the questions come in, any final words, any final thing you would want to share with the folks here?
I guess I have a couple things. We've talked a lot about tactics and plans and initiatives, and there was so much good insight here. And maybe it's easier in a smaller organization like ours, but we like to say we do a lot of things that don't scale. Like, that one-on-one conversation that you can't do with, let's say, 1,000 people, makes a big difference. Mentorship and all that. Like, we invest, and we ask all our people managers to invest a lot of time in the grind, in the day-to-day. A lot of it is that you just have to do that extra work. I think for the topics we're talking about creating opportunity and more diversity, that sort of in the trenches work is really important, and probably applies to all the other kinds of work that we're doing in general.
Yep. Well, and here's a good question that may help us to kind of wrap up where we're going today. But a question came from the audience. A number of times over the conversation, people have mentioned trying to develop more women leaders internally. And as we know, key opportunities often only get offered to people who have a sponsor higher inside the organization. What are some ways we can connect more women with the sponsors who can advocate for them when decisions are being made about who gets those career-making opportunities?
Yeah, I'd say that's a great question from, I think it was Laura that asked that. And we believe that sponsors are so important that we launched a sponsorship program, a formal sponsorship program, where we matched 18 of our most senior leaders with 18 women who we identified as proteges, in a year-long program, effort to build relationships, to create an expectation of the sponsor and the protege, and to build an instinct inside our organization for that level of engagement. In particular, we've made those matches outside of departmental relationships, and it also has the benefit of creating more connections and more relationships that wouldn't necessarily, naturally develop just based on how we're organized. So we have taken a heavy hand to be a catalyst for those relations, recognizing that some spaces they happen much more naturally than in others. So we're just at the beginning of that journey, but we have a lot of optimism about how it might help us close some of the gaps that we have.
Well, Oris, you all are doing so many things right at the NBA, and some of the internal policies and things that that are even made public. You know, you really are able to set an example for other companies of just a lot of things to get this right. And especially in the professional sports world, we know how much you have to do, a lot more than just talk the talk. And you're doing that at the NBA. So
Thank you.
kudos to you and your team.
More to do.
So I think we might be good unless anybody has anything else. I just can't thank you all three enough. Your support of our work at WiST just speaks volumes. We wouldn't be here without that. And for you to take the time to join us in this new format where we do have leaders come on and just talk candidly, I think it will mean a lot to your own employees and also people who are looking to enter into the space. So many, many thanks.
Well, thank you. It
Thank you.
was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Go Heels. Oris will be talking before Saturday. It'll be an epic game no matter what happens. Oh, there's a Go Duke coming in there. Oh, everybody's now chiming.
Take care.
Okay,
All right.
thanks so much. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.